I think the best way to learn News King is to look at some of the old shows we've done. So, what we're going to do is take a look at one of our past shows from last semester. So, go ahead and go over to the window tree to the left hand side, and you'll see the shows drop down. We're going to go back in time a few months. So, go ahead and right click on shows. You'll select date. And we're going to go back to let's go back to November. Okay, so we're going back November 2015. We know we had shows on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So let's go back to maybe November 10th through 12th. And go and do end of range until November 12th. So start of range November 10th, end of range November 12th. Hit OK. And you'll have the shows pop up to the left. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Tuesday and take a look. And open News 3 Live at 4. Double click that. And we're going to see what that show looks like. Okay. And what I'm doing when I'm clicking up and I'm actually expanding the column so I can read the story slug, make it a little bit longer to read it. And if you remember right now, what mode am I in? I'm in default mode, but ultimately I want to look at the producing side. So what I'm going to do is right click on the rundown and load column format. And you'll pick producer format. You'll hit load. And then you'll have this. Okay, so this looks a little bit different than the show that we saw a little bit earlier. That's because this is showing you that we've been through this show already. It's already been timed out, and we were about 7 seconds light at the end. Okay, so we're going to go through all the different elements, and maybe you guys will get an idea of what you're doing and how you'll need to do it when you're putting a show together as the news producer. Okay, so I'm just making the columns a little bit bigger, and you can do the same thing. Okay, all right. So let's start at the beginning. We talked about element 1 being the bumper, and that's saying that this is a production by the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism. The news open comes second, and then we have the pre-show tease. So let's take a look inside the pre-show tease and see what script elements are inside. So double click on that first element, VO pre-show tease campus fire. And if you get a warning saying someone's already clicked into it, that just means that you're all looking at the same script right now. Hit OK. You just can't make any changes to it because someone else is in your script. So just keep that in mind. When someone else is in a script, you can't make a change to it. Only the person originally in the script can make a change. So all you can do is read it. You can't make any edits to it. Okay, so you'll see that there is a VO line and then a talent box. Now the VO line is something new that we've not talked about yet. VO means voiceover, as some of you guys already may know. And this might be because you have done voiceovers already, or you were in the reporting class last year and you talked about that in Dr. Sadler's class. Let's minimize that for a second and go back to the rundown. The beginning of the slug says VO. So whenever you have a VO in the show, you should always begin with that prefix in the slug. And that's something to help the director out. And it also keeps you as a producer in the know, because you know that element is a voiceover. So we always have prefixes. We tend to have many, many different, if you look down the line here, there are very few stories without a prefix here. And all of these prefixes mean something else. So we'll go through all of them and what they mean. So this means that element 3 is a voiceover, and the slug is pre-show tease campus fire. Okay, so we'll go back into the Microsoft Word document script, and it's a voiceover. And it says the following text will prompt. That means that everything under it will be on the teleprompter, and the anchors will be able to see it. And the anchors read the pre-show tease live, so you definitely want to make sure that they can see the script. That is important for them. The talent box indicates who will be reading, and the switcher column indicates where the video is coming from. The video tends to come from DDR2, so that's something that where we roll the video off in the switcher. The switcher has two different places the video can come from: DDR1 and DDR2. DDR2 is typically where our show video will come from. DDR1 tends to have our commercial breaks, and it has maybe a bumper for the show, but that's about it. So DDR1 is almost exclusively the breaks, and DDR2 is exclusively our show video. And that's where we have our voiceovers, our sound bites, our packages, etc. And any of the formats, so the different formats of that. Okay, so I'm going to okay that. And then that important information must always be in there. Again, when you're writing the pre-show tease, you may not know right off the bat who's going to read it. That comes right before we're going to print. That's one of the last things you do as a news producer, is decide who will read these different elements. Okay, so someone very likely wrote the pre-show tease and not knowing exactly who was going to read it off the top. All right, so the pre-show tease reads, after a fire destroys several local apartments, residents are working on getting their lives back to normal. How local organizations are helping out ahead. So that is a way to give the audience an idea of what stories, we're doing for the show. We're not giving away anything. We're giving them an idea of what story's coming up, and it's a way to kind of get their attention and tell them the focus that we are the angle we took on the story. So the angle of the story was how people are coming out to help these people. It's not necessarily how the fire started or anything like that. So that's what we're promising the audience. We're making a promise to the audience that this is what we're going to show them later. Okay, so whenever you write a tease, you must make a promise to the audience. Give them something to look forward to. If you make a promise and don't fulfill it, then you have not done your job correctly. You have to always tease an element of the story that is going to happen. So if you tease how the fire started and the reporter didn't talk about that at all in their story, then you did a poor job at news producing, because you've now made a promise that you couldn't keep. So to make that not happen, you need to know what the stories are about. Producers should go and watch all of the news packages ahead of time before they write these teases. And that means that you do have to get up and you have to go into the control room and look at all the different packages that have been turned in that day. And we have a cutoff time at 2:30, and that's precisely because we can't be waiting until 3 o'clock or 3:30 for people to get their work done. You have a job to do as the news producer. You need to know what we have for the show. And if we don't have it by 2:30, then we assume we don't have it at all, and we go on and decide what else we're going to do, and maybe we'll tease something else. So that's why we have that set time of 2:30 for all the reporters, because we have to do all of this writing, and we have to write the pre-show teases and all the other different things in the show, and we need to know exactly what we have. So 2:30 is the cutoff time for that. So what someone did, whoever produced the show, they went and watched the package, and they decided what angle the reporter took, and they made a promise to the audience that we would tell them, how people were coming out to help these people who had their homes destroyed. Okay, so I'm going to Control W, as you should too. Don't hit the X button, we know about that. And take a look at the next element. Our second voiceover pre-show tease is about the Trump rally. Looks like Colleen's reading it, so we'll open it up. And it's, again, we have to have that VO line. The VO line's important because if you don't have that in there, the director doesn't see it pop up on the teleprompter. And I'll give you an example. I will minimize that, and go into prompt the rundown very quickly, and you can see how it looks to the anchors and the director who is watching the teleprompter in the control room. Okay, so this is what the show looks like via teleprompter. And this should give you an idea of why it's so important to put the different video information within the rundown. Because when you're directing a show, a lot of things are going on. You're looking at the rundown, but you're mainly looking at the teleprompter because everything in the teleprompter should tell you what's about to occur within the show if it's produced in the right way. So we know right at the beginning of the show that we have a voiceover for the first pre-show tease. And then Brie knows that she has to read, and we know it's over DDR2, so that's for the director as well. If we scroll a little bit, that went a little crazy. It's a little bit difficult for me to manipulate it. Okay, so I'm going to back up a little bit to that second pre-show element right now. You see this is about the Trump rally. And you're going to see a VO line because the producer put a VO line in there and the director can see it because they did their job correctly, right? So we know Colleen is now going to read for that story. And then the third VO line pops up. That's the third element of the pre-show tease. And we know Brie is reading, DDR2. And then we talk about nonprofit news organizations. And then we begin on camera 1. And it looks like, this does look like we made an error here. And that's why I'm going to go back and look, because it's hard for me to believe that we have Colleen on camera 1 here and then Brie on camera 3. I'm thinking someone made an error here. So I'm going to minimize that and look off of here. And yes, that is an error because let me go back real quick. Okay. If you ever do that, if your rundown ever looks really wonky and there's something wrong with it, it's because you probably sorted by one of the columns, and all you have to do is click through it until it looks right again, and you know the numbers are to the left, so you know that's correct. So we know we have a 2-shot on camera 1 here in the format column, which means that someone, meaning the news producer, made an error here. Let's look at the script. I'm going to close out that pre-show tease script because we've already looked at that, and look at the welcome with Colleen and Brie on camera. And as you see, that is an error because there is no way to have a 2-shot on 2 different cameras at the same time. This should be both of them on camera 1, not Brie on camera 3. Someone made a mistake, which can cause confusion and may have caused confusion off the top of the show. Can't remember that day precisely. But that should have been camera 1 for both of them, not camera 1 and camera 3. Because if they were on 2 different cameras, it'd be 2 different scripts. That's not the case. So I Control S that, I'm going to save that, and then close that out and look at it again on the teleprompter. All right, as you see, it should be a 2-shot on camera 1, Colleen and Brie together for the opening welcome. And then we're going to go right to another voiceover about weather. So it looks like weather led our show this day. I guess we'll find out why in just a second here. All right, so they're only on camera, looks to be about 6 seconds long. So let's go back and find out and look at the corrected version of the script because that will be a little bit helpful. All right. So those kinds of things you have to really look at because most of the time we begin our show on camera 3 on a 2-shot. But if we begin on weather, that means camera 3 usually has the weather shot. So camera 3 had to move and get the weather anchor on that shot. Camera 1 had to scoot over to the 2-shot. So producer forgot that, and when they put Brie's stuff together, they put her on the wrong camera. All right, so there's camera 1. Good afternoon, welcome live at 4. Colleen already talked. Brie continues talking over a voiceover. So we know, the director knows stuff. They have to roll a voiceover here, and Brie has to continue talking. Weather has been mild for the last few days, but that could all change less than 24 hours from now. According to the National Weather Service, Macomb falls into an area of enhanced risk for severe storms tomorrow. This means a great chance of damaging winds, hail, and perhaps even tornadoes. I think I might remember this day. A stark contrast to weather we're seeing today. All right, so then we have the 2 box come up. ME8 is the switcher button for the 2 box. We'll have Nick and Bree in that box. Nicholas Stewart has been tracking the storm. He has more. Nick. So then we have Nick intro the weather for about 10 seconds on camera, which is camera 3 over at the Weather Center. And then we have him do, and then we pop up his weather graphics, and then that's about 30 seconds long. So all in all, it's about 40 seconds long for the first weather, and he's talking about the big change for weather. So when he's finished, we go right to Bree on camera 2. So that's for the director to know, and also for Bree to know what camera she's supposed to be on. They will see that in the teleprompter, and the director is looking at this in the teleprompter. So all of this is important. This is also important for the production crew, because whoever is running camera 2 knows they need to have Bree on that shot. And this looks like we're introing the Campus Fire story. So let's take a look at the intro to the package. Many Campus Point residents are in the process of moving after a fire damaged several apartments last Friday. News 3's Dakota Sherwin surveys the damage and speaks to some of the residents pushed out of their homes. Okay, so that's the intro to the news package that Dakota Sherwin did. And then his package, we can see here, was 1:54, and looks like that is his standard out. He wrote for News 3, I'm Dakota Sherwin. So that's the last thing that's said in that news package. That's important for the director to see, and also for the anchors to see. And the director needs to know what the last couple words are of the news package, because then we're listening for it, and then we know that as soon as we hear that, for News 3, I'm Dakota Sherwin, we take Bree on camera 2. She says, thanks, Dakota. There was no report as to the amount of damage that was caused. Okay, so that is important, but I'm thinking that there's something missing here. So we're going to go back. I'm going to minimize the teleprompter, and I'm going to open up the package Campus Fire and see if something's missing. And it just looks like, no, nothing's missing here. You don't have to have the package script in here, but you do have to have the CGs, and those are all counted for. So what's important to have here is the package box. Just like there's a VO line, there are also lines for SOTs and packages and ways to build VOSOTs and that kind of thing. And that's all under add-ins. So if we go into add-ins, and if you look at VI for video, go ahead and click that, you'll see that there are lots of different things that you can put in to any of the scripts. And the ones that we typically use are the ones with the hyphens after them. So PKG hyphen, right? If you click on that, it'll come up with a clip ID. The clip ID is what the video is saved as. So whatever the file name is should be what the clip ID is here. Out cue, Dakota did that fine. For News 3, I'm Dakota Sherwin was the last several words that were said in the news package, so that must be included. And the video duration is important. We need to know exactly how long that news package is, so we can account for that time within our show. So all of that must be included in there for the show to run properly. So we're not going to okay that, we're just going to cancel out, and I'm going to delete that one out of there so you won't see that. And we have a 2-line CG, and CGs must be filed for anything with video, like a package, any VO, voiceover, any SOT, sound bites that are, at least if the person's up for 5 seconds or longer, then you should file a 2-line CG saying their name on the top and then who they are on the bottom. Now, we do have a specific way that we file our CGs. Our CGs should be sentence case on the top line, but you capitalize the first letter of each word. So you see residents affected. By is the preposition, so we don't worry about that. By apartment fire. So everything but the word by is a capital at the very beginning of the word, right? Line 2 is all caps. So typically line 2 is either someone's title or it's the location of where something is occurring, okay? When we do the state as a postal code, as a U.S. postal code, so IL for Illinois, CA for California, PA for Pennsylvania, WV for West Virginia, etc. So you need to know the postal codes, and that's pretty typical for TV news. And we just did Macomb, apostrophe, or not apostrophe, comma, IL, okay? So that's important to have on the bottom line here. And we have this up for about 5 seconds. So you take that at the very beginning of this news package at 00 and we hold it for 5 seconds. And that's how long it should be for people to be able to read it. So, that's about standard. Have it up for several seconds. Now, the rest of them are not done correctly. So that is something that you as a news producer are going to have to go look around and look for, because people taking other classes, doing filing CGs for you, they typically don't know the rules that we have for newscast. The 415 class does, anyone that works for News 3, but people who are just contributing don't necessarily know the rules that we have to have for the show. And those are just standards that have to be in place, because if everyone did something different, then the show would look really sloppy, and that would not be a good idea of how the TV news world operates. So we do have to have some kind of standards, and those are the standards we have created for our show. So we're going to go back, and the producer did not catch this. So again, someone was asleep at the wheel a little bit here. I'm going to go back and capitalize student. Ignore. Sometimes it'll tell you someone's name spelled wrong, but it's just not used to seeing that spelling. Student should be capitalized. And this is what you'd have to do as a news producer. So you'd go back and just capitalize those words if they were not correctly put in, and you'd save it. Control S, not that icon over there. Control S, and then it's saved. And then that's all. Those are all the CGs in there. Control W to close it, and it's closed out. Okay, so we've gone through from the very beginning to get to the package, and then we'll open up the tag. And we have Bree on camera 2. The following text will prompt. Thanks, Dakota. There is no report as to the amount of damage that was caused. Okay, that's on the right-hand side. The dialogue's on the right, we talked about. So that is an idea of putting the show together. And as you see, we have these prefixes here. So INT means intro. Whenever there's an INT, that means that this is an intro to a story. Maybe a package, maybe a VO, but we typically have those just so we keep everything straight. Sometimes things can get moved around in the rundown when we're working in it before 4 o'clock. So knowing that this is the intro keeps it before the PKG and the tag. The intro should always be the first element of that story. So if we see it in the prefix, we know if it got moved down somewhere, we know that that should be right in the beginning for the Campus Fire story. And then PKG for package, Campus Fire, tag for Campus Fire. And this is the anchor tag. The reporter is not actually in the studio or anything like that. This is just the anchor who's tagging back on camera and giving a follow-up piece of information about the story. We've had a real problem with tags being absolutely of no interest to our audience and not giving any crucial or good information. A tag should never be thanks so-and-so, and that's it. And I've seen that plenty of times where people just aren't thinking creatively, or they aren't thinking like a reporter, so they just will, maybe sometimes they have nothing. You need to include, if we're going to have a tag, and every story doesn't necessarily have to have a tag, but sometimes they do look better that way. You need to have some kind of information that was kept out of the story. And sometimes that can be difficult for the producers to come up with something when the reporter comes in, puts their content in, and then leaves and runs out, and you don't even have them there to talk to them about their story. It is nice to have them there if you're able to get a hold of them and ask them some things about their story. For example, about this story, just gonna come up with some things here. What else about maybe this campus fire would people like to know that maybe wasn't included in the story? Maybe if there was a donation that could be made to people who'd lost their homes, or if the Salvation Army or the Red Cross was helping these people. You know, maybe there's an account set up for these people somewhere to donate. That kind of information that wasn't put in the package, that could be used. But again, that sometimes is hard to come across when the reporter leaves and they aren't even around to ask them. I have maybe for a package about a blood drive, I will put in times when the next blood drive will be occurring, because people typically don't talk about that in the package itself. So the tag might be, if you want to donate for this blood drive, the next drive will be held at such and such time, and put such and such place. And that's a piece of information that people can use and is like a follow-up to the story. So you have to be, as a producer, a little creative and a creative writer, and kind of think about, what information could I put in here that is a good segue out of this news package? It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly about the package itself. It could be related to the package. It could be information related to the idea of the package, but not necessarily about the story itself. So, but always look around for really poorly written tags out of packages, because you'll have that. And sometimes it's better just to drop it entirely if you're unable to come up with something for that particular story. However, that's not the best way to do it. It is best to get in touch with a reporter and talk to them about what information they may have left out of the story that we could put in the anchor tag, and that is really the best way to do it. So if you're able to get a hold of them, you should. Okay, so we'll move on. The next story is read here by Colleen, and it's an OTS in the format column, and that means that we have an over-the-shoulder graphic. That's what that abbreviation means. So OTS means over the shoulder, and that means that we've requested a graphic to be placed over the shoulder. It will be on the right side of the screen, but it will be really over their left shoulder. So let's open that up, take a look at it. The City of Macomb is still on the search to replace City Administrator Dean Torson's position. So this is a City Council or a City of Macomb story. Colleen is on camera 1, at least was on camera 1 in the fall. So whenever we have an OTS on camera 1, in the switcher column, under switcher, it should say ME1. And that's not too difficult to remember. So if you have an OTS for camera 1, then when you assign who is reading this story and decide what camera it is, because it has to be on the camera that they're looking at, you need to put ME1 if the person is actually on camera 1. ME1 is the button on the switcher that the technical director has to push to make sure that camera 1 plus a graphic is put in preview, right? So it's not just a straight camera shot, it's actually a mix effect shot, incorporates camera 1 plus an over the graphic effect. So that is a different button than just plain old camera 1 on the switcher, and that has to be done correctly. So we know that she is on camera 1, but it's really ME1 because we have the OTS graphic. Okay, I'm going to Control W and close out. Okay. And then we see that was the intro to the story, because now we have a VO. So that's a voiceover coming up. So Colleen will continue reading live, but we're going to roll video. So we have the VO line, and we have a 2-line CG, because this again is video, and for every piece of video we must have a CG, and it's correctly filed. on the search again for a new city administrator in Macomb, Illinois, and Macomb, Illinois is all caps. It's correct postal code. At Monday night's city council meeting, Mayor Mike Inman told News 3 the contender for city administrator declined the offer. Inman says they will start the search for another city administrator this week and will make an offer at the beginning of January. Okay, so we can see here that January is misspelled, so that could cause a problem for the anchor when they come upon this word. They might actually say it that way. And don't laugh, because when you're up there, there's a lot going on, and when that word scrolls past your eyes, you sometimes will say it as it's spelled. Even they should have caught this misspelling. Even the anchor should have caught it, but apparently they glanced over it and did not see that. That can cause an issue. So if you were the writer of this story and you took credit for it and you made that misspelling and you turned it in for a grade, I would penalize you for having that word misspelled. Even though the anchor should know that probably is the month of January, that is a careless act by the writer, and it shows that they were not paying attention when they hit that save button, and they also didn't look over the script, or they didn't have someone else look it over. So I'm going to ding people when they make misspellings, because it can have a negative effect on the newscast. And for every error we make, and every error that happens on air, our credibility is diminished a little bit. Now, some people in the audience will forgive errors, but if you make them over and over, then it shows that you're not learning from them, and that is not a good situation for any newscast. And I'm sure you guys have all seen people make mistakes on air, and it can be embarrassing. But I want to train you guys to be very aware of what you're doing at all times. And I don't want you walking into a newsroom and making errors, because I'll tell you, you'll be called out for it. And if it's not by your boss, it'll be worse. It'll be by your anchor. And when your anchor calls you out for a mistake, it's typically in front of everyone. And I've seen that happen to people before. So you do not want to be the person misspelling their scripts, because it makes them look bad if they happen to say it wrong. And I've actually seen this in Las Vegas to someone who was producing a show. They made a kind of a big error in a script, and the anchor read it and then apologized on air and then said, I apologize for that error. Our producer put that in there, but I know that that's not correct. That's not correct. So I'm apologizing for that. That was a big deal. That producer ended up being fired later. Not that day, obviously, but later on, because he was not learning from his mistakes and was making someone in a big market look bad. And when the anchor is not happy, nobody's happy. So do better than that. Okay, so I'm going to Control W out of that. All right, and then we have a soundbite coming up, and I know it's a soundbite because the prefix SOT, sound on tape. So SOT, City Administrator. Note that when it's one story, it's the prefix that changes, but not really the slug as much, right? So the slug remains the same, right? For Campus Fire, it was INT Campus Fire, PKG Campus Fire, Tag Campus Fire. For City Administrator, it's in here as City Administrator, and then just the prefix really is changing. Let's go into the SOT. And it says SOT, City Administrator, and the out, and this is important, there is an out cue for a soundbite, just like a package, right? So someone is speaking on video, and we're playing that, and the mics are off, so the anchors are sitting there waiting. So everyone needs to know what are the last couple words said in this soundbite, in this piece of video. Be forever in doing that are the last few words, right? And the duration is 11 seconds long, so that's important too. Note that it's an SOT with a hyphen. That's the one that we typically use for the show because it has the correct information we need in it. And I'm gonna hit OK. And then here's the 2-line CG. It's Mike Inman speaking, and he's the Mayor of Macomb, and that's correctly formatted as well. And we take it at the very beginning of the video and hold it for about 5 seconds. He's on camera for longer than that, but we have it up for about 5 seconds, okay? And that is the soundbite here. Now, I'm going to close that out and say that there's no tag for this story. So it's probably not the best formatted story, or maybe not the best written story, because there probably should be a tag to that. What happens is that we play Mayor Mike Inman, and he talks and says something, and then all of a sudden we come to a different anchor, Bree, and now we're talking about repairs around campus. That can be a little disconcerting to the audience. So after a soundbite, you really should have some kind of either a SOT-VO, so maybe it should have been a SOT-VO over video, and we just end the story with some kind of piece of information, just like we talked about anchor packages, like some kind of piece of information that we've not already said, or we will take a piece of information maybe from the intro and go, you know what, maybe I should put that at the end of the story instead of, somewhere in the VO. So we could have done that, but I'm sure there was extra information we could have included that they didn't do. So it kind of is abruptly going from a soundbite to a new story for concrete repair. Not the best idea for the writer to have written it like that. So just keep that in mind when you are writing a story. You really should have, you shouldn't end on a soundbite for a story. You should have something else after it, even if it's the anchor speaking over video or if the anchor on camera saying some last tidbit of knowledge about that story that we didn't already talk about. So I'm going to go on to the next story. It says concrete repair. We know that it has to be an over-the-shoulder graphic shot because Bree is on ME2. Bree is typically on camera 2, but for this it's a mix effect shot. That means an OTS. So I look, and yes, in the format column, it's an OTS. Okay, so we'll go on to VO, and again, that's a different prefix, meaning voiceover. So it'll go from Bree on camera to intro the story with a graphic over her shoulder to voiceover, and she's speaking over video now. We've got a talent box, and that's perfectly fine to have that. We know Bree continues speaking here. We've got the VO line, which is crucial because the director needs to see that. And then we've got the 2-line CG explaining what the story's about. So additional sidewalk repairs near the blue emergency light between Tillman and Memorial Halls began earlier this morning. The WIU Landscape Maintenance says they anticipate the work on the affected portions of the sidewalk will take about 2 to 3 days. Other repairs will also be made this Thursday. To the sidewalk in front of the College of Fine Arts and Communication recital halls, pedestrians will need to use alternate routes and are asked to proceed with caution while the sidewalk is closed. Okay, so that's the story. I'll Control W out of it. And that's short and sweet. Well, it's 28 seconds. I'd say it's a little bit long. There are probably things that we could have shortened just a little bit. VOs should typically be about 20 seconds, maybe 25. So I'd say it's about 3 seconds too long at least. A reader should be about 20 seconds, maybe a little bit shorter. It can go from 15 to 20 seconds. Packages should typically be about 1:30. Now, can they go longer? Sure they can. But keep in mind, if the package is 1:30 and then we have an intro, an anchor intro, and then the anchor tag, which runs maybe 10, 20 seconds, the package actually will take up about 1:50 of your time, maybe nearly 2 minutes. So if you have several packages that are running longer than 1:30 plus all the anchor intros and tags, then let's say you have 3 packages, that's more than 6 minutes of content right there. You probably only need about 11 or 12. Suddenly you've got, not a lot of other stories to be included. So you really want to hold people to that 1:30, kind of that area. You do want people, and also sometimes packages are too long because people are not focused enough as a reporter, and they just put a lot of content in there that isn't really needed, or maybe it was poor writing. So A good reporter should be able to make a package and make it about a minute 30, minute 35, because they're using they're writing tightly. They're using the right words, and they're getting to the point of the story right away. People who meander will typically hit around 2 minutes or 2:30, and then you start to wonder, how important is this story to my show? Do I really need it? And there have been occasions where people submitted packages to us, and we cut them down, and didn't air the package, but maybe made it a voiceover or made it a VOSOD. We took their video, edited ourselves from their pack, and just made it like a VO or a VOSOD. And that's, we can do that. So if there's a story that you don't think is package worthy, but you think, well, it could at least be a VO on our show, that we can take their video, and you can have the videographer edit it down to be, maybe a 20-second story. But we always need to make sure that we have 40 seconds of video for each VO. So even though a VO may only be written about 20 seconds long, maybe 25 seconds long, we need about 40 seconds of video. And that's to make sure that we don't run out of video on air, because what could happen on the production side of things is that we could, maybe someone mistakenly rolls the video early, and we don't want to run out of video on air. So it's this very standard to cut video for voiceovers to about 40 seconds. And we're going to hold to that in this class as well. So that's what we always do. The videographers, when you bring back video, you need to have at least 40 seconds edited for us. Even if the story is only 15 or 20 seconds, we need to have 40 seconds of video. Also, we will use some of the video for maybe teases and that kind of thing. So we try to take video maybe that won't air during the show and cut tease video with that. So always bring back 40 seconds of video for any voiceover that you go out and get. All right. So we're not going to go through every single story here, but you kind of get the point here. We have an intro to Ladies Night Out, then we have a VO, intro to Spoon River College, then a VO, intro to Veterans Day, and then a new prefix you guys have not heard about, which is FSG. And FSG stands for full screen graphic. So this is not video, but this is a graphic, and you must have a full screen add-in here. So where do you find that? Well, you go to add-ins, and you could go to CG, and CG is where many of the different options for graphics are, right? And we'll go to full screen. So there's actually a full screen here, and you open it up and hit OK. And you get to put your title here, and it looks like they title it Veterans Day Screening. And then they gave the information about when the screening was taking place on the graphic, and they put it in here. And then what happens is that the person that's running graphics that day will create the graphic on the live text software in the other room. And we tend to print the CG list around 3 o'clock, maybe a little bit after 3. But you want to give the character generator operator time to make all these CGs, because they have to make every single one for the show, and it can take a little while. And also we want to make sure that they spell things correctly. Even if you spell something correctly, what if they mistype it because they're rushed? So you don't want to have this printed out late. And reasons that happens, reasons it's not printed out at 3 o'clock, is because the show is not stacked. And stacking a show means that you place the show elements in order how you want it to be, how you want them to air. So if you are running late and you have not stacked your show and it's still out of order, then I can't print the graphic list. And that causes the CG person to have to run late and have to rush and potentially misspell something because they are rushing and don't have time to check their work. So that's how that happens. So that is not what you want. You want to make sure that your show is stacked in the order you want it. All the elements are exactly how you want them to be. And you want that to happen by about 3 o'clock. So yeah, you do want your work done about 3. So that's a full hour before the show begins. But there's a lot of prep to be done to get the show to happen. There are a lot of people who have to be doing work on the production side and you want to give them that time. So things, you can always add things if you need to, but you always have to tell the director if you make a change. So that's the thing. If we have breaking news, then we have to let our director know that things have changed and they have to make the changes and let all of the crew know. And that kind of thing is common and it happens all the time. But you do want at least the bulk of the show done. You want to have everything in order by about 3 o'clock. Okay. So I'm going to close this out. Control W. I'm not going to save it. Okay. And Veterans Day also has a voiceover after the full screen graphic, and then it has a tag on camera, and Bree tags on camera too, right? And it looks like we have the Trump in Springfield story after that, an intro, Colleen with an OTS over the shoulder graphic. And then we have the package and then the tag. And then there's another OTS for Bree and a soundbite, SOTS SOT, sound on tape. And then we have a tag on camera. And then we come to the 2-shot, and that's for the tease. So both anchors appear on camera. I'll open that up. And this is here in parentheses. That's so they don't say what's in parentheses. It's also in lowercase, so they don't read it. So the anchors are pretty used to that at this point. So they don't say take tease music. But that's a note for the director and the technical director to see that, so they know that this is where the tease is and the music needs to be started here. So that's a production crew note. This is the tease typically happens on camera 3, which is the 2-shot camera. It's also the weather camera, so if you have weather at the end of the A block, then it's going to have to be on a different camera. Usually camera 1 can take camera 3's place, can be moved over. So what Colleen says, coming up, how students are reacting to recent racial tensions on Missouri's campus. And I'll close out of that. And then she continues reading over a voiceover for the tease. Hear from the Mizzou president of student government next. And again, you have a 1-line here. This is what the tease graphic says. Mizzou, it'll have coming up on the top, and that's standard for the tease graphic. And then Mizzou officials speak out. And then the second element for the tease is what Bree reads. Both anchors should read for the tease. So we usually have two reads there for the end of the A block. And then it's a voiceover. So she's speaking over video. And the graphic says NIU death charges. And a tragic death on the NIU campus leads to the arrest of 3 men, what they're being charged with, ahead. Close that. And then we go to break. So break 1 happens, and it's 2 minutes long. And then we're getting ready for the B block, where our regional and national news is located. So we have 2 minutes to get our anchors. Looks like they are moving from our desk, the anchor desk, to the plasma shot, which is right next to the desk, and they have to stand there. So it's a standing shot. We may do this differently for the semester. We did that a few times. We did things differently. It's what the producer wants. So if you want them at the plasma, then you have to request graphics to be placed behind them in the plasma TV behind them. And we will come to an agreement about how we want to do that for the semester. The class last semester decided they wanted to write everything on the board, but then people got in the habit of erasing things once they were made, and then sometimes they erased the wrong thing, and then people didn't make the graphic, and then we found out during the show the graphic wasn't there, and we had to, put a generic News 3 logo behind them and that kind of thing. It just causes a little bit of chaos. So there are different ways to do it that I've done in the past, and we might have to go back to the original way of doing things to prevent those errors from occurring. So we'll talk about that when I'm back in town a little bit. All right. So we have a talent reopen at the very top of the B block, and this is where it announces each of the anchors who are in that show. So for this show, it was Colleen and Brianna, and also Nick Stewart doing weather, and then Eric Sutera doing sports, and all 4 of them are announced in this talent open, right? So we're announcing the talent for the show. And then after that open, then you see Colleen and Bree on a 2-shot in front of the TV plasma with a graphic behind them, probably about the Mizzou protests. Okay. And if you guys did want to see how this show actually went off, this is from November 10th, right? So it's on our YouTube channel. You can see how it actually happened, and I would encourage you to go look at it and spend some time watching it and looking at the News King version of the script and see how it actually occurs on camera. Because everything that you're doing in here, every single thing that you put in this News King software in this show is supposed to occur on air, right? So that's what we're putting together. We're telling the director how it must be and how every shot must happen and what's going to happen for every shot. So all of these different things are important. All these little different pieces are important. All right, so looks like Colleen on camera 3. This one's not popping up. It just might be because News King doesn't like me today, which is sometimes it happens. All right, so Colleen's on camera 3. The president of the University of Missouri System has resigned due to pressure from protests against racism on campus. This is most likely Brianna's read here. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a reason to have that talent box. It's not coming up for me right now. Yeah, it is. It's right there. For some reason, it's not showing up. There we go. So it is Bree, also on camera 3, because it's a 2-shot, right? They're both on the same camera, looking at the camera. Tim Wolf announced his resignation at a special board of curators meeting on Monday. So I'll Control W and close out of that. And then they speak over a VO line. So you have the talent box, you have a VO line, and you've got the 2-line CG, right? This is wrong. Anyone tell me, well, I'm not in there, but if you know postal codes, you know that MI is not Missouri. Now, I think I remember this happening during the show, and I think Mario may have been there too, because I think he called that out right away. That's Michigan, I'm pretty sure. Missouri is MO, I'm pretty sure. I think MO is Missouri. So whoever requested this CD, well, I'm going to say right now, Jose, you wrote this story, so because you put your name on the story, so I know who to come after later. So Jose is likely the culprit here. He put the wrong postal code here, which means that we have now put this graphic up that's incorrect, and it's not good. Also, look what we're missing. We're missing the time that we put up. I mean, we should put it at probably the very beginning, so it should be at 00 and then hold for 5 seconds. So that is also missing. So there were a couple things not done correctly here, and you can see how it can kind of snowball from here. The chancellor of the flagship campus, R. Bowen Lofton, also announced he will step down from his position by the end of the year, and then Bree steps in. This came after a series of protests on uninvestigated racial incidents occurring on the campus. The week-long protests led many faculty and student organization groups to demonstrate walkouts and uproars. Protesters say the resignation is a small, important victory. All right, so we did make a mistake there, and that is something to be on the lookout for. You need to know your postal codes, right? So not a good situation there, Mr. Jose, and anyone who didn't catch that, because we should know what they are. So I'm not going to save that. I'm going to leave that in there for posterity. And then we have the soundbite. So we have a soundbite for this story about Mizzou protests. And then we have a different story. The other story we teased with the NIU death update, and that's here. Brianna reads that in front of the plasma. Then Colleen looks like and we have a full screen graphic. So if we look at it, ME7 in the switcher column is where the button for the full screen graphics. So those come from the ME7 button. And if you're going to put the talent box in, you need to know what the switcher button is, and that's ME7. And that's also written on the board. There are a lot of different things written on that whiteboard in there that are going to be very helpful for you. So take a look at the whiteboard and note what some of those different things say. We can go over that when I come back, and also like some of the EPs could help you with that, or people who've had the class already could also tell you what those mean. But I think they're fairly self-explanatory. We try to make them as understandable as possible. All right, and then we have a full screen. So it's actually a mugshot style graphic 3 different people, their names, and then we sent a picture to our shared Gmail account. I will be giving you guys all of that login information that you can use for your stories when I come back.